Funding for this program was provided by Friends of Iowa Public Television, the Iowa Public Television Foundation, and generations of families and friends who feel passionate about Iowa Public Television programs. From the studios of statewide Iowa Public Television, this is Iowa Candidates 2010, a pre-election exchange of political ideas and public policy. Here is host and moderator Paul Yeager.
13 days remain until the general election of 2010, when Iowa and the nation return to the voting booth. There's a lot on the line. On Monday and Tuesday of this week, we discussed the campaigns for the United States Congress with 7 candidates seeking to represent Iowa in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate. This evening, we shift to statewide elections, and we start at the top of the ticket with the office of Chief Executive, Governor of Iowa, and we also have with us 3 candidates seeking that 4-year term. Let's meet those candidates who are with us now. From Ames is Eric Cooper, who is on the ballot as a Libertarian candidate. Next to him is Gregory James Hughes. He's from Cedar Rapids and an independent candidate for governor. And also at the table is David Rosenfeld from Des Moines, seeking to be Iowa's chief executive as a member of the Socialist Workers' Party. We welcome each of you to Iowa Public Television, this forum that we have here, to the Iowa Candidates 2010. So first of all, we want to get to know a little bit about each of you. And Mr. Cooper, I'll start with you. Why should voters pick you on November 2nd?
Well, I'm an associate professor of psychology and neuroscience at Iowa State. I'm also the vice chairman of the Libertarian Party of Iowa. There is only one reason why you should ever vote for a Libertarian candidate, and that's because you'd like to see the government get smaller. What we advocate is a return to the libertarian notion, the Jeffersonian notion, of limited government. What Jefferson pointed out is that the government in a society is the institution that's allowed to use force, physical violence. There are certain activities that require force, and the reason why we have a government is in order to perform those activities. The activities that would require force would include, first, protecting people from body crimes like murder and rape and assault. Second, protecting people from property crimes like theft and fraud and pollution. Third, enforcing the terms of contracts when there's a dispute. And then fourth, there are certain economic activities known as public goods that, for one reason or another, the market left to its own devices can't supply in the optimal amount. That would be things like laying roads. But those are the activities that require force. And having the government do anything beyond the limited set of activities that require force is foolish, because the government's a monopoly. And like all monopolies, it has very little incentive to please its customers and very little incentive to be cost-effective. When we give more and more responsibility to the government, we're giving more and more responsibility to the least efficient institution in our society. What I'm trying to do in this election is get 2% of the vote. The reason why we need 2% of the vote is, under Iowa law, a minor party can gain major party status if their governor candidate can get 2% of the vote in the governor's election. If I can get 2% of the vote, what that would allow us to do is run lots and lots of candidates in the next election cycle. And that would put pressure on the major parties to start adopting small government positions.
We've talked to a couple of the Libertarian candidates already during this forum this week. If you were successful in getting that 2% of the vote, would you continue and would you run out more candidates in the next cycle?
Absolutely. That would be the primary goal of the party, would be to recruit more candidates and then try to run candidates for every partisan office in the state. We just want to get 10% of the vote for our candidates. We aren't trying to win elections, but 10% is enough to force the major parties to start adopting our issues to steal our votes.
And you covered many of those things, but again, just boil it down for me for a little bit. What exactly does a Libertarian Party candidate mean?
Libertarian Party candidate always means you want a smaller government. You want it reduced to just the basic set of functions that require force, and we want to stop doing things beyond that.
Okay. All right. Mr. Hughes, give your pitch. Why should people pick you on November 2nd?
First off, I'd like to thank Iowa Public TV for having us on, and I admire my candidates for even stepping up to the plate. I think sometimes it takes a little bit of a warrior to put yourself out there and decide that you want to make a change. But rather than tell you why you should vote for me, I'd rather tell you why you shouldn't vote for me. You know, I'm honest, I have common sense, and I wasn't born with a gold spoon in my mouth. Those 3 things right there should disqualify me. But there's too many issues just to stand back and not do something about. I've been lobbying for the last 10 years, and I'm just absolutely upset and appalled at the waste in government. And until you get somebody outside the system, that's never going to change. An example is earlier, I'm the co-chair for the Iowa Child Support Advisory Committee. I went into that committee not thinking too much of the people that's on it, but I've actually earned a lot of respect for them. But they waste $53 million a year collecting child support. It's appalling. And it's not about deadbeat dads or moms, it's about making a lot of money for the attorneys. And that has to change, and unless we get somebody outside the normal political system of the Democrat or Republican, it's just absolutely never going to change. And there's too many issues to go through right now, and I won't be able to touch on all of them. But anyway, again, I just want to thank Iowa Public Television for having us on today, and I want to thank my other people here today. I think that, like I said, it takes a lot to step up.
I want to ask you about an independent. One of the hardest things to do as a governor is to work with leadership, if it's the same party or not the same party. If you are elected, there's not going to be many independents in the House or in the Senate. How are you going to be able to do things from an independent if you are governor? You know,
that's a great question, and I think that's something I hear a lot of. And being an independent, I think, puts me in a kind of the middle of the road that I can try to get both parties to work together. You know, I'm on the board of 4 Iowa corporations. I work for a large corporation, and politics is in everything that you do. And the idea is to try to create a consensus that's going to be good for the people. You know, one of the problems that we have in the state of Iowa, the only people that seem to be benefiting is the upper 2%. And as Mr. Cooper said, the 2%, he wants to get, I think, is at the bottom. And so we need more of the middle class, more of the low income to actually decide that they're going to step up. One of the things across the state, I always get this thing, people tell me they don't vote. And I always tell, yes, you did. And they'll go, no, I didn't vote. I said, well, yes, you did. You just chose to let government do it for you. Because if they can make you complacent, then they know they can automatically put you in the win column because you're not going to be there to vote against them. Everybody has to step up. And stepping up doesn't mean giving money to candidates or whatever you're going to do. It means getting out and voting.
All right, Mr. Rosenfeld, let's get people out to vote for you. Why?
Well, I'm a production worker at the Firestone plant in Des Moines. I'm a member of the Steelworkers Union. I'm a longtime unionist. And I've been a fighter for the rights of the working class for many, many years. The starting point of all of the Socialist Workers' Party candidates' campaigns is the fact that we're in an economic depression. Unemployment is long-term and persistent. It's 10% around the country. It's much higher for blacks and for certain other categories. We're facing all kinds of cutbacks at every level of government, but especially at the state and municipal level. Attacks on our political rights, a permanent state of war in this country are all aspects and consequences of the economic crisis that we're in. So the central question that needs to be addressed is, what does the working class need to do? What are we going to do about it? And we think that the answer cannot be looking to a politician of the Democratic or Republican Party that represents the interest of big business and the interest of the capitalist system, which is in itself in a crisis. So we have to break with those two parties. We have to look to our own power as the working class. Our weapons, our solidarity, our union power. We need to organize a labor party based on a fighting labor movement. Last Saturday, I was in Keokuk, Iowa. I joined a march of 800 workers and unionists supporting the workers at Roquette America that are locked out. This company, Roquette, is using the economic crisis, is using high unemployment as a union-busting bat against the workers there. They're trying to break that union. And I was proud to be marching with fellow steel workers, with auto workers, with electrical workers, supporting these workers in their fight to maintain their union and their living standards. It's this, solidarity, implementing solidarity in action, that's the starting point to building a movement that can actually begin to defend the working class against the consequences of this economic crisis.
So what would happen if the Socialist Workers' Party is elected? I mean, how many people... Say the company in Keokuk is successful and breaks the union. How do you solidify when there's fewer and fewer workers to join the party, when jobs continue to go away and those are the traditional union jobs? How would you stand together to fight the government?
Well, I recognize that there are fewer and fewer workers in unions. That's a reflection of the weakening of the labor movement that's been going on for decades. We have to build a fighting labor movement, one that fights for all workers, not just those that are in a unionized workforce, one that inspires people and that mobilizes them, We need to build a massive union movement in this country, even though right now we're in the single digits. So the question is, what do we do to engage in that struggle? What do we do to exercise solidarity? And through doing this, we'll learn our worth and we'll begin to tap into the power that we have, the power that has been hidden from us in a certain sense. Those that say you just get out and vote for a Democrat or Republican are really saying to you, you can't do it yourself. The working class doesn't have power to do it. They have to look to somebody else to do it for them. And that is the exact thing that we have to get away from.
Mr. Cooper, what would you do if you were governor during the last 4 years during the economic crisis? What would you have done?
Okay. Well, I think what we need to do is to make Iowa the freest state, the one most conducive to business. What that means is, to me, you don't regulate businesses beyond what you need to protect the people from body crimes and property crimes and fraud. As long as a business isn't doing that, well, they should be allowed to operate their business in the most efficient manner. Now, the other thing that would serve as a stimulus package is if we could lower the minimum wage. There are lots of people who are out there whose labor would be worth between what the market price of labor is and the minimum wage now, who would like to have jobs, who don't have jobs now precisely because of the minimum wage. What we should do is let the market set the price of minimum wage labor. And like my graduate student was telling me today, his parents are both mildly retarded. They cannot get a job right now because of the minimum wage. They would both like to work. They could become wealth producers instead of wealth takers like they are now if we let the market set prices. So that's what I would do.
There is still some role for government, but could government be smaller? If you were to see government go smaller, where would you make cuts and reductions?
Well, again, I would reduce everything except to the core functions that require force that I've already talked about.
So what would those be?
Well, that would be we could privatize education, for example. Now, the government should help to subsidize education somewhat, but the money should be attached to the individual child to let them go to the school that they want to. We could sell the roads off and have them operated as a public utility. We need the government to lay the roads, that's for sure, because it requires eminent domain. But after that, the roads are simply a natural monopoly, very much like the electric company or cable TV company. They should be sold to a private company and operated as a natural monopoly. Welfare spending makes sense to maybe, if private charity is insufficient to help the poor, maybe there's some tax money that's necessary for that. That's also arguably a public good. But after the money is collected by the government, it doesn't have to be the government itself that's administering the programs. That should simply be sent out for bids, and then they get a private company gets a 2-year contract where they actually administer the program, and then we can look at the end of 2 years what kind of job they're doing. Are they pleasing their clients? Are they getting people off the rolls? That would allow us to fire a company that wasn't doing a good job. So I think these are way more efficient ways of handling things than what we're doing now.
Okay, so I pick up a theme. You're an employee of a public institution, so you talk about children. So what about secondary, high school, colleges, Iowa Public Television? We're part of the education department. Where do you see our future?
Well, I think Iowa Public Television needs to be viewer-supported. I don't believe it should get any tax money. If there's enough viewers willing to support it, that's great. And I think public television may have been arguably a public good in the late 60s, but now where there's so many programs on television, so many different channels, I think it's outlived its usefulness, to be blunt, and we could probably get away without it.
That's fair, and that's why I asked, because I knew you were going to say that. But have you been on any other television stations or networks in your coverage of your campaign leading up to today?
Well, really, I haven't been on television, but I have been on radio a lot, and I have not been on Iowa Public Radio. So I think the commercial stations have given me a lot more coverage than the public radio, at least at this point. And so, arguably, I would argue that maybe the public radio is not serving the best interests.
All right, Mr. Hughes, same question. If you were the governor the last 4 years,